first procedures for the cycle is training evaluation. In most of the organizations, they provide the training to the employees. If they do not provide the evaluation to see the effectiveness of training, it's just a kind of wasting money, because they never know whether they have to modify the training program, and they also don't know whether they have to still continue the training program to the employees. Training evaluation, it might be the final steps for the training cycle. Training evaluation is concerned with establishing the effectiveness of the training to see whether the training objective has been met, to see what the participants think, and is there any other outcome? Does it also help to increase the performance or not? It could be similar to establishing the validity of the selection model, because it is helpful to use an evaluation framework. In short, the idea is to see the effectiveness of the training, to see whether the organization needs to do some modification or still go on to their training program. Kirkpatrick evaluation framework is the most powerful and popular framework for training evaluation. There are 4 levels of the data to collect and to see the effectiveness of the training, and each level showing deeper and more complex effects. Indeed, most of trainers got started in level 1 or 2, although 3 and 4 have the most useful data. And later on, I will describe what they are. Level 1 is at the stages of reflection, level 2 is learning, level 3 is behavior, and finally is the result level. This model consists of 4 levels. Level 1 is a reaction. Trainer would like to see the initial reaction of the employees after training. Usually, they will distribute a questionnaire survey to the employees straight after training, and to see whether and what do they feel about the training, content, and the form of training. The second level is learning. Trainer would like to see the trainee whether they have shown some evidence that they have attained the immediate objective or not. Usually, the trainer or the organization will have the performance evaluation after a short period of training, and to see whether the trainee has attained the immediate short-term goals or not. At level 3 is behavior. Trainer would like to see trainee whether they have any behavioral changes. Usually, organizations will have the performance appraisal and to evaluate the performance of the trainee and see whether the performance has been improved or not. At the top stages, the last level is result. Organization would like to see, after receiving training, to what extent that the trainee would help the organizations improve their goals and to attain the organizational goal. So as a whole, it's not only change in their behavior or the performance. Organization would like to see how the training would help the organization as a whole to improve. And usually, they will collect a set of the data from a group of the trainee employees to see whether they really help to increase and improve organization effectiveness. And level 1, to assess the reactions of the training section. Usually, after the training, employees will be given an assessment to work on to evaluate the training reactions. Some of the sample questions include, how did you find the training? But another question is, would you trust the immediate reaction of the trainee? The question is doubt. And one of the reasons is that most of the time, the employees would just feel happy to get a break from work, especially if the organization offers them the seminar or the lectures for the training section. They just feel very happy to have a break instead. Besides that, sometimes employees would not think that their training content is very useful at their work. Besides that, some of the questions can be also regarding how useful training was predicted later learning and skills application. So we are not quite sure if we only relied on level 1, whether the training section is really very useful to the employees or not. Therefore, usually, the organization will also move on to level 2 learning to see whether the employees really get something from the training section. Some of the assessment example including knowledge test, or we have to compare the pre or post training test. We'll give the employees some tests to see whether they really learned something. For example, like in a security company, the security guard may have tests in order to see whether they got security knowledge after receiving the training. Besides that, the company may also compare their post and pre-training performance and see whether it got some improvement or not. And usually, we'll also collect the data immediately after training. But again, we should look at long-term retention, usually maybe half a year, and to see whether they really learn something and make use of the training contents. Number 3, at the level 3 is the behavior. And the assessment example including to observe the performance, behavior, speed, and also accuracy of the employee's behavior. It can be useful for assessing the effectiveness, but full of bias indeed, because in this employee's behavior may not only be influenced by the training contents, the training section. Instead, they may be also affected by some other external factors or the peers factors. And so that's why the managers rating trained employees may be biased. They got some bias expectation on that. Managers will feel that, will consider that employees, their performance will be increased because of those training. But in the reality, indeed their behavior could be affected by many different things. So that's why they will consist of lots of bias expectation on that. Besides that, when data is collected, will also affecting the result of it, because we have to consider what is the optimum time to collect those behavioral data. 1 month later after the training, 3 months later, 6 months, or 1 year? As the time is getting longer and longer, so it's more external factor affecting employees' behavior. We cannot conclude that it's only the behavior influence will only affected by the training courses. However, if the evaluation is just after the training, maybe 2 weeks or 1 month, still you may not see any behavioral change because the time span is too short. So we have to be carefully consider when is the optimum time to collect those data. Finally, at the top stages is result. Organization will be very interested to see how the team performance assessment or how the team performance will be affected by the training section. Indeed, some of the assessment example, including like the team performance assessment and observe optimism and productivity and see whether it's not only the individual reaction, but the team as a whole will have some improvement and changes. Of course, this type of the data collection or observation is quite difficult because it's not only focusing on the individual. Instead, we have to look into the group performance and effect. Besides that, the same of the individual performance, there are lots of external factors were affecting the team performance. It's not only due to the training section, maybe because of the economic situation, or in the past year is the pandemic, and so it may largely reduce the team performance instead of having a training section. And so we can see that there are lots of different factors who are affecting the team performance. Therefore, there are still some criticisms of this model. Although it's quite popular and useful, but we cannot say that this is no limitation. Number one, we are assuming that learning is hierarchical and systematic, but in some of the time, learning would not be quite hierarchical because it depends on the training contents. Sometimes the training contents may not be having the whole progressive approaches. Instead of, it may be only relevant to different types of the job demand. So it may not be as systematic as we expect. Besides that, this model assumes that everyone will go through the same stages, stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they also learn at the same way. In the reality, it may not be the case. As what I said that sometimes our individual behavior may not be directly affected by the training courses. Instead of, they may be affected by some external factors such as their leaders or their team members. And so we cannot expect that we will have one-on-one stages in the same way. And well, this is too simplified to conclude the effectiveness of the training. Last but not the least, it may not be specific enough because it does not suggest the optimum method for measuring the performance and also the effectiveness of the training. So we still got some criticisms of this model.